return to Venezuela along with those skilled workers. So that's something that we really need to take into consideration as well, um, because if we don't have that, then they're going to have to rely on other forms of income or revenue in order to kind of get the infrastructure rebuilt to attract organizations and businesses and things like that. And that's worst case scenario for me. um, I really really dislike um, the idea that we should just kind of let the regime fall and then expect that everyone who's outside of Venezuela should kind of stay where they are, and we can just rely on the IMF and the World Bank and all these other groups to kind of help rebuild it. And for me, that's worst case scenario. That's just not fixing anything at all. It's just keeping the situation poor. Um, and the other issue here is that the Venezuelan economy is going to have to diversify. Um, we've seen what happens with reliance on oil, and well, over reliance, I should say. I mean, we only have to look at that and the really poor social policies that caused the boulevard to be essentially worthless. Um, and there's just there's just so much work, and like, I'm not a Venezuelan, you're not a Venezuelan, but I mean, it's a really interesting thing to think about and to discuss. Um, and yep,
Yeah, definitely. Because like the last time we had this sort of Twitter Spaces, it was interesting to see and hear about the different point of views from different Venezuelans. Because the last time we host one of these on Twitter, more or less they were just saying that the best way to get some sort of help is to get like international organizations. But then some of them also disagreed and say no, 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 the best way to actually help ourselves is through our own actions within the country. And so there seemed to be some sort of disagreement the last time we kind of spoke about this sort of topic when I was hosting it on my Twitter account.
yes, yes, and I mean, it is a very valid conversation and it's a very important one. But I mean, the biggest thing about that, doing it themselves, I mean, that actually also, um, things need to be done in order to make that even remotely possible. And the biggest thing is kind of showing these people that if you return, things are going to be different. The money that you invest into the country is going to be used for good purposes. It's not going to pad someone's bank account. It's not going to pay for their new pool. It's not going to these, wasteful programs. You know, it's being put into the country to kind of shore up the economy, to kind of um, shore up the value of the currency, to restore confidence in investing in Venezuela, which is just as important as attracting the educated Venezuelans back. Well, just Venezuelans in general, and specifically, of course, people who are sincerely interested in rebuilding the country. Because I mean, while this entire like nightmare with socialism has dramatically impacted Venezuela, I don't look at it as this is the end. The country is ruined. Everything is screwed. Because you only have to look at Peru in the 80s. When Peru had Alan Garcia, the economy was a wreck. It was bad. Inflation was horrifying. And Peru pulled itself out. Now, this is not the exact same thing, and this will not be. You can't treat these things along the same kind of way. You can't look at them in the same kind of way. I mean, but you can look at that as an example that not all is lost. And with Venezuela having, a very well educated middle class, and many of them have found success abroad. I mean, you only have to look at Canada. Venezuelan engineers in the early 2000s flocked to Alberta to work in the oil sands, and they made very successful lives. And there is a lot of opportunity here. But like I said, it comes down to restoring that confidence in investing into the country. And like, listen, I've been covering Latin America for quite a while, and being down there, you get that kind of unique perspective, and that's a very hard kind of thing to do, is to convince people that the government is actually working for the most part in their best interests. It's really hard.
Okay, I got a comment from my YouTube channel. Somebody
Mhm.
say, "Thanks, friends, for knowing the reality of my Venezuela." So a person from Venezuela is watching us on YouTube.
Oh, well, hey, thank you very much. I have not been to Venezuela myself, but I have been to South America. Um, don't think I'm very welcomed in Venezuela, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but it is a very, very important thing to talk about, because we in the West have a somewhat stereotypical view of Latin America, and even right now more so Venezuela. We just look at it as kind of another kind of tin pot um, Latin American dictatorship, and nobody really cares about it. But I mean, the effects of the situation have been seen, all throughout Latin America, and to some parts, within the United States as well. Like when I went to Lima in 2018, well, 2017 and 2018, each year there were more and more Venezuelan kind of refugees, and that that actually had a very serious impact on Peru as well. I saw a lot more competition for resources. I saw a lot of kind of disgruntlement with the not only the Venezuelans who were there, but the government, for kind of allowing them into their quote unquote space. Um, and you see, like, this whole situation in Venezuela doesn't just affect Venezuela; it affects the entire region, and that's something that we really need to wake up and realize and see, like, it is more crucial than ever that we put a stop to the national bleeding of Venezuela.
Yes, as far as the whole entire situation goes, I noticed that not once our President Joe Biden has spoke about Venezuela. When Trump was in power, I believe he may have, briefly mentioned that. And I think our government actually recognized the legitimate presidency of like the other person. I forgot his name right now.
Oh, Mr. Forgetful Juan Guaido, I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, more or less, my government actually recognized him as the legit president and not Maduro.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that was a nice step, but honestly, the problem is that Guaido is completely useless, and the whole Venezuelan opposition, like the mainstream opposition, is completely useless. Now, I'm not talking though about the rank and file people, the ones who are out in the streets, doing the protest, taking all the risks. They're not the ones I'm critiquing here. They are wonderful people, and they have my absolute respect for what they're trying to do. But I mean, for me, it's Leopoldo Lopez, it's Enrique Capriles. I mean, it's these really useless, corrupt individuals. And I mean, like, and the last time I was on a space about this, I said it. They are incompetent.
Yeah,
They
I
are.
remember the guy was like really upset.
He was, but you know what? It was the truth, man. It was the truth. They suck. If we're going to speak in kind of like, simpler terms, they suck. they're horrible, but they're drains on the opposition. You know, Primera Justicia, Voluntad Popular, they're garbage. The leadership of these organizations are garbage, and they're parasites. They're feeding off the opposition in order to profit themselves. Because look at this. They are so incompetent. It's more convenient for the regime to just let them wander around and cause trouble. Because if they let Guaido wander around Colombia or Florida or wherever in God's name they've shoved him to this week, he's useless. He sucks the hope out of the opposition, and that's what they want.
Okay, there's a comment on my YouTube page. It says, it's really hard, the situation. For 20 years, Venezuelans were indoctrinated into socialism, and that shows. There are good Venezuelans, of course, but most of the Venezuelans go to Chile or Peru.
Yes, a lot of them do. Ecuador as well. I mean, a lot of them go to everywhere, really. I know now there's a lot of good Venezuelans out there. Like I have a few friends who have who fled to Peru, and they're ardent anti-social. They're ardent anti-communist, I should say. And it and they still like they'll tell their friends um in Peru like don't vote for these people. You know, um, don't support.
It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting you mentioned that whole entire not voting thing because I think around 2 weeks ago, during the whole entire president election for Venezuela, there was actually a campaign for Venezuelans to not actually come out and vote because they feel as though that the election is not legitimate because it's going to have some sort of trickery behind it.
Well, no, and there would have been there was, and like the voting in Venezuela is a farce, and I completely accept that. Um, and the reason that I accept that is because, like I said, you only have to look at these people. Lopez, Capriles, Rosales, Velasquez. All these kind of people. They're all the same. They're literally all members of Socialist International or affiliated with them. So, like, literally, you're swapping out one group of really crappy socialists for like slightly less crappy socialists who are also at the same time from very, very, very rich oligarch families. It's really hilarious actually. Like it's almost like a theater. um I used to say that there was a lot like it's the same trough, different pigs. That's the best way I can describe it. Like, let me see, one person wants to come on. Okay, we shall add you as a speaker. Hello. How's it going? Let's see, connects.
It's still connecting. Oh, there it is.
Okay, there we go. Hi, welcome.
Sup?
Not much. We're just having a chat about this, kind of what's going to be the road ahead for Venezuela, kind of like
Uh,
a rebuilding scenario.
may I say something about Venezuela
Sure,
in Latin America?
sure.
Problem there is that they don't see socialism as bad because even Maria Corina Machado, she's socialist and she defines herself as socialist, and the ADECO, the Guaido's party, they define themselves as socialists. They don't think that socialist doesn't work. They only think that those people like the Pesur, Maduro, and Chavez, they couldn't make it work. But for sure, they think they will be able to make it work somehow. And that's the problem with Venezuela and Latin America. They don't want to change the political system that they have in the social system that is behind socialism. They only want to be. They only want to change the heads of the movement right now and the heads of the government.
No, exactly. It's like I said before. I mean, it's the same trough but different pigs. That's it.
Yep.
And that's one thing I've noticed too. Like I've spent a fair bit of time in Peru, So I mean, and you see it like there's this optimism behind it, and yet at the same time, sorry.
Yep, because in Dominican Republic we had that. The former government, the PLD, the PLD, they are
Hmm.
I will say like old-fashioned communists. I mean, socialists. It's kind of weird, but let's call them like old-fashioned socialists. And the PRM, the PRM, they are kind of that was I won't call them woke, but they are between wokeism and like traditional socialism. Maybe like more like Korea's socialism, like Chavez, like around the 2004, some kind of socialism like that. So they're not different. They're all the same.
Well, yes, I mean, like I said, it's just someone else who wants to kind of take their turn and kind of rob the country. Because I mean, there's one thing I've noticed about Latin American politicians. I've had some small experience with them. They're generally bandits. Um, well, actually, you know what? There's a couple categories for them. They're either bandits or they're overly optimistic idealists with absolutely no idea what they're doing. Um, and it never works out well. Like I said, I mean, you look at the history of Peru, for example, with like Alan Garcia. Peru managed to pull itself out of that through Alberto Fujimori. Now, I'm not going to say Fujimori was perfect or
But it was good.
wonderful. Well, he got the job done. He
Yeah.
implemented economic reform, which I mean, it came at a sacrifice of certain rights, which I don't really agree with. But I mean, that's really a whole different kind of topic. Kind of the morality of that. But the thing that I'm really trying to say here is that there is a possibility for Venezuela to rebuild and actually not only just rebuild, but build back even better. Um, and it is going to require um, making sure that we can kind of convince the Venezuelan expats, to return. And that requires building confidence, which is, in this climate, very, very difficult.
So you're like basically you're saying that we should tell those who are having a good life or a decent life out of Venezuela to come back to fight.
You know, it's not that easy, really. Just to say that, like, I mean, I'm not telling people. I wouldn't tell people to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm not really saying that, but like, really, what this conversation about at this stage? I mean, we can talk about how we can implement this kind of change. This um exchange of government or change of it, I should say. But I mean, like, what I'm really saying here is that we need to, if there is a new government that comes in, it needs to be different, and that's a really big challenge. It's a huge challenge.
It is, man.
um and because I mean, like you said you're from the Dominican, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you hear it all the time, these people who always complain about the government. They wish things were better, they wish things were changed. But then you say to them, "Why don't you run?" "Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to do that. Or I can't afford it, or I
Yeah.
don't have. It's not possible."
People who wants to get the revenue but don't want to sacrifice anything. They
It,
just want to get everything done without their without them doing anything. Yeah.
By the way, guys, we actually got a Venezuelan inside this chat room, the same one that came in our other space.
oh, yes, yes, yes. I'm sorry. If you want
Oh,
to come
I'm
on,
sorry.
just if you want to come on, just request. I mean, do
By
you
the
want to
way,
co-host?
she doesn't know any English at all.
Oh,
Ah, my Spanish is sufficient, as everyone who's ever interacted with me knows, but that's why I did it in English, because I wanted to kind of make my point. But if Lele's, if you want to come on, just send me like a
You
Lele's
have to, you have to tell her like in Spanish. She cannot
ah
understand.
crap. Yeah, that's right. I'm thinking here. ¿quieres entrar la conversación por una, what's the word, speaker?
You want me to translate for you?
Yeah, just say like I'm too tired to think in Spanish right now. Just say like if she wants to come on as a speaker, I'll do it. She just has to put her hand up and I'll make her a host.
Ok, Lelis, Ernest dijo que él está un poco cansado para hablar español, o sea, no puede pensar muy bien, que si quieres ser una speaker, o sea, si quieres hablar, que mandes el request, la solicitud de hablar y él te la aprueba.
Muchas gracias.
You're welcome. De nada.
But so it's a very, very important kind of conversation. Is oh, perfect. Hola, lady.
Esto,
No sé nada de inglés.
No, está bien, está bien. Gracias por entrar a la conversación.
Okay, yeah. Okay, for those who are listening on my YouTube, basically she's saying good evening, and also Ernest is saying like welcome to my conversation.
Yes.
Entré hace ratico a YouTube y me salió que estaban por YouTube, entonces yo dije deben estar en Twitter y sí, vine y pues hice un tweet, pero bueno, yo estoy presente pero no los entiendo y no se preocupen por mí, hablen ustedes porque me interesa que el tema Venezuela se dé a conocer. Muchas gracias Ernest y muchas gracias Tyler y a todos y a los que están presentes.
No pasa nada, porque este tema es muy importante para todo el mundo, para saber la verdad sobre tu país y la situación que estás corriendo.
Sí, así es un tema muy importante. Muchas gracias.
De nada. I think though, like I was trying to say here, like the biggest question that is kind of raised for me is how do we really restore this kind of confidence? Like enough.
Ernest, you want to know that you want to hear the answer?
Sure.
How like almost in the Hispanic sphere, how like almost every former socialist country built back, and I don't like it. A right-wing dictatorship. Look at Spain. Even Venezuela had that with Pérez Jiménez. Chile with Pinochet. Videla for the short period of time that he was in Argentina. And some others dictators in Latin America and Spain. They built those countries. Even Batista in Cuba, he built Cuba before Castro get into the power. So I think the only way for Venezuela is to get one of those right-wing dictatorships, because in every case that has been implemented, almost in every country, look at South Korea, look at Spain, Argentina, Chile, and Venezuela, they give up the power. Whenever they restore the country, they give up the power to elections. And I mean, except for Franco. But when Franco dies, right away they went to write a constitution. And in the other cases, they called for elections and they lost, and they gave all the power once they lost. So I think for me, the best scenario for Venezuela is to get a right-wing dictatorship for 4 or 5 years and then build back.
I don't think like and then sorry.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
No, I was just gonna say like I can understand that point. Like I can really understand what you're trying to say there, and there is some merit to it, because what they would need though is but it'd have to be kind of unique in the case of Venezuela, because you see, unlike a lot of these other countries, the economic situation in Venezuela is terrifying. I mean, the country is essentially a ruin. And it wasn't like Argentina or even in Peru. The brain drain that Venezuela has seen over the last 2 decades is horrifying. It's huge. And so you can have this kind of right wing dictatorship, and it will provide some measure of stability. But I mean, you're going to have to take the economic system, like everything is going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up.
Okay,
Complete.
there's a comment that I see on my channel. It
Mhm.
says Maduro now speak and newspeak. Todos compañeros. A few years ago, they were in favor of beating gays, and the left is eating it like Che Guevara all over again.
I really don't know much about that. To be perfectly honest.
I mean, if like any sort of powerful person, they want to use the the sort of progressive stuff for like people. So
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, I also have to admit though, I do love the Chavismo shills, in the United States. Um, some of those guys just make me laugh so hard. Um, like these little champagne socialists who go on these kind of guided tours of Caracas. Um, and but yeah, like it's crazy. But kind of Nate there, just to kind of get back to what you were saying. Um, like this is a complete rebuild. Like this is like this is like a house that's completely torn down, and you have to rebuild it foundation and all. Like like it's almost like I hate to use this phrase, but it's almost Bolivarian in its kind of scope. I really hate to bring up that guy's name in this kind of context, but it's essentially you have to rebuild the entire country,
Yep.
and in order to do that, you need a really radical kind of social change, and like economic and social change.
Ernest.
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
I think I have a question for like the Venezuelan in the chat right here. So I'm gonna switch for Spanish for a little bit.
Sure.
Ok, una pregunta para ti, pues. Me ha dicho una vez que básicamente más o menos existe un team, no sé, un grupo de hackers para hackear varias computadoras. ¿Puedes explicarme un poco de eso para Venezuela, para mí y el resto de las personas que están escuchando?
Tyler, eso es conmigo.
Exacto, sí.
Bueno, el grupo Teen HDP, desde hace ya muchos años atrás, unos 4 o 5 años atrás, se dedicó a sustraer información de organismos de Venezuela, de personas enchufadas. Empezamos a revelar los contratos que tenía tanto la oposición y familiares de la oposición con el gobierno, cosas que hace 4 o 5 años la gente decía que no, que era imposible. Bueno, el TIN HDP al cual pertenezco, pues sacó mucha información de esa, eliminamos el carné de la patria de muchos personeros chavistas, entre ellos Nicolás Maduro, que después salió en la elección del 2019 diciendo que del carné de la patria, y cuando fue a escanear su carné de la patria, pues sencillamente este ya no estaba, porque se le había eliminado tanto el de él como del de Diosdado Cabello. Y en cadena nacional, pues quedó en evidencia que lo que habíamos dicho días atrás era cierto, que nadie nos creía, por supuesto, pero sí era cierto. Y así, bueno, hemos estado revelando mucha información. Hace un par de semanas atrás, mi compañero, el famoso conocido como el pingüino, HDP, reveló sobre los grupos de Hezbollah que están en Venezuela. Él reveló información, nombres y apellidos de estas personas, y que muchas de estas personas viajan por el mundo con pasaportes venezolanos, cuando en realidad son terroristas. Entonces, eso es muy importante porque ahí está involucrado el mundo entero.
Wow. Okay, so more or less, you were saying that, yeah, about 2, 3 years back, apparently, yeah, there are like a group of hackers, and that they're going after like people like Maduro. And also, Nate, please chime in on some of the stuff too, because it's like really technical. Basically, more or less, yeah, 2 years or 3 years back, there's like a group of hackers that, they went after Maduro and they started to hack their computers. And yeah, 2 years. But Ernest, getting back to your point, what do you think about like the hackers and all that stuff?
Well, if they're hacking people like Maduro, and the other members of kind of the upper echelons of the kind of government and even the opposition, let them hit Lopez and Capriles and all them. Let them hit Guaido. It's important because the more we get kind of the behind the scenes information, the better. Because I mean, it kind of opens things all up. Like I've had this theory for years that the opposition, the mainstream opposition, is collaborating with the regime. I mean, it doesn't make any sense otherwise. Because I mean, like normally a regime does not appreciate someone such as Guaido running around causing trouble. Usually that's someone, they're not really obsessed with the optics outside of their own country. And I mean, Guaido was already um losing steam when he was running about, like he did his announcement that he was the interim president and all this nonsense. And then he just kept losing momentum like right off the bat because everyone just realized he was terrible. And then he tried to do that weird kind of, I guess, revolution where he tried to go and seize that airfield, and it failed terribly. That alone would have got the regime to try and snuff him out, as it were, like eliminate him. But they didn't. He's still out there doing his thing, and that, so I mean, like that implies to me like that there is a certain level of either collaboration or acceptance, because they know that it's more convenient to have him out and around because it just squanders resources. It takes away from from potential real leaders who could actually change things. But yeah, no, like the hacking is one of the weapons that is necessary in removing the regime. It's essential, to be honest with you. I mean, there needs to be more of these kind of things being done. There needs to be kind of the emails need to be hacked, communications need to be hacked. Um,
By the way, you need to tell like the story about what you did to Nicolas Maduro.
no, I'm no, 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 no. We're not talking about that tonight. Like that kind of like that actually like that wasn't just me though. Like there was a lot of people who actually did that. Like there was so he got a lot of those things that I'm not going to say what they actually are. It wasn't but actually I just really don't like the situation down there. And I mean, like it needs to be addressed because, like I said, this is very destabilizing, not just for Venezuela, but for the entirety of Latin America. And I mean, I like Peru, carajo. I like it being stable and working. And I know that's not what it is on the best of days, but still, um, if this situation is resolved, then things get a little bit better there as well. Um, and Tyler, I'm pretty much a Peruvian. Like I'm like 80.
Oh
I'm like
yeah, it's like
yeah, yeah.
the Inca Cola, everything.
I've got Inca Cola energy, man. Um, but no, like this is essential. Like we need to deal with this, and if we can bring down this regime, which is a Cuban run regime. The Cubans run the show. Havana tells Maduro what to do, and Maduro nods his head and says, "Thank you, sir." There is Cuban intelligence officers operating in Venezuela. There is Cuban soldiers on Venezuelan soil. Um, and they are aiding the regime in a variety of very concerning ways, mostly in terms of intelligence gathering and dissident suppression.
Okay, I have another question for her. 1 minute. Just another question.
Sure.
Bueno, señora. Pues, ¿qué piensas tú sobre redes sociales en todas las partes en día hoy? Porque básicamente es muy fácil para compartir muchos videos de cosas que estás ocurriendo en Cuba, en Venezuela, pero ¿piensas que redes sociales son una fuerza para la buena para este tipo, este tipo de cosas para nosotros?
Es conmigo, ¿verdad, Tyler?
Exacto. Sí.
Por supuesto que sí. De hecho, en Venezuela lo que más daño le hace al régimen es la red social Twitter, porque como sabemos, Twitter es la red mundial de información. En Venezuela la censura del periodismo es brutal. Los pocos medios de comunicación no pueden informar la verdad al 100%. Entonces, las redes sociales han permitido que la verdad de lo que pasa en Venezuela haya traspasado fronteras. Eh,
Un momento para hablarlo en inglés. Okay, so what she was saying is that she thinks that social media is a good thing because, like, on Venezuelan television, basically they try to, censor stuff. Adelante.
Um, yes, and they do a lot of the censorship, which is why I'm glad we have Twitter and to an extent Facebook, but mostly like Twitter is essential in this kind of battle, and I mean it is like a hearts and minds battle. While spaces like this are good for organizing, they're good for kind of having these open um, discussions. Um,
By the
yeah.
way, did you see that cartoon?
Oh God, Super Bigote. Yes.
Okay, por cierto, señora, ¿qué piensas sobre este armado de Venezuela sobre Super Picante?
¿Me repites la pregunta, por favor?
¿Qué piensas sobre este armado en todas las redes sociales sobre, no lo sé, Maduro como un superhéroe?
Bueno, mira, y tengo que decir que los venezolanos tenemos un humor para todo. O sea, nosotros, porque es nuestra idiosincrasia. El venezolano es una persona muy alegre y pues ya nosotros sabemos que esas cosas que para muchos es insignificante, como las caricaturas, perdón, en contra de Maduro, a ellos les molesta. Y es una manera que nosotros tenemos como de celebrar algo que les moleste, porque en realidad ellos tienen todo el dinero del mundo. Venezuela, a pesar de toda la crisis y todo, sigue generando dinero y ellos tienen todo, pero entonces estas cosas que para muchos son insignificantes, a nosotros nos causan alegría, que nos burlemos de ellos, porque es que como no tenemos instituciones a nuestro favor o instituciones internacionales que de verdad actúen en contra del régimen, pues la verdad es que estas caricaturas nos alegran el día a nosotros y les amargan el día a ellos.
Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with her because like that that cartoon was like the best type of propaganda, like more or less, like it reminds me about like the propaganda you see in China, where more or less they paint like the Chinese people as like the good guy, but then like the Japanese are like the the terrible people.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I mean like he shouldn't have been like Super Bigote. He should have been like Super Panchito or something like that. They don't like because he is like very fat. And like or he could have been a transformer because he used to be a bus driver. I always call him the bus driver of the revolution. Um, and that used to like really make the Chavez shells angry. Like they hated when I said that because they're like, "Oh, you're just picking on him because he's a bus driver." I was like, "No, I'm picking on him because he's an idiot." I mean, he didn't
Yeah.
even finish high school. Like I'm sorry, like I'm not downing people with without education, but this guy's an idiot. I mean, like who goes on a national televised um, address and eats an arepa in the middle of it?
Oh my
Like
goodness.
he's like, oh no, we're gonna have to do this. It's gonna be tough times ahead, and he starts eating. It was horrifying. But I mean, Lily, tengo una pregunta también. Um, ¿Cómo se dice? ¿Tienes fe en los líderes de la oposición? Por ejemplo, Capriles, Rosales, Velázquez, López y todos.
Okay, his question for those who are listening on my YouTube, he's asking like, do you have any faith for like the leaders? Yeah.
Ya, me repiten porque no entendí la formulación de la pregunta.
Lo siento.
Okay, su pregunta para ti es, ¿tienes fe para los líderes en poder?
No, por supuesto que no. Venezuela, digamos que el 80% de los venezolanos sabemos que los líderes que tenemos actualmente, autonombrados, por supuesto, no son confiables para que podamos salir de este régimen.
Mm.
Muy poca gente cree en ellos, ¿verdad? Yo diría un 10%, y el otro 10% del que hablo, saco del 80, son los chavistas, que pues ellos sí creen, porque a ellos no les conviene tampoco creer que la oposición esté vendida para el mismo chavismo. Pero por supuesto que no, ninguno es confiable para los venezolanos que realmente queremos salir del régimen. Ellos no son confiables. Pero me retiro, muchachos, tengo cosas que hacer, responsabilidades que cumplir. Muchas gracias, Tyler, muchas gracias, Ernest, por
De nada.
estar siempre pendiente de Venezuela. Se les aprecia y un abrazo en la distancia.
De
Bye,
nada.
bye.
Good
Bye
day.
bye.
But well, that kind of spoke to, I guess, kind of that conversation that we had before, where she really wasn't in disagreement with me when I pretty much like smashed the entire opposition. Like it's such a circus, and it's a no, it's not even a circus. It's a tragic opera. It's just, or a tragic comedy even, because I mean, like, all these people are actors on a stage. They're all reading from essentially the same script, and no one is really um is really stepping up to kind of be like, hey, this is wrong. We don't like what you're doing. It's time for this to really change. They're not doing that. And it's really, really sad, to be honest, because I mean, like, Venezuela has so much potential. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's squandered. It's being squandered. It's just being like, it's pissed away, and it's to the benefit of my country, to be honest. To the most part, is to the benefit of the United States, because we get the skilled ones. We get all the good, well-educated, moneyed Venezuelans for the most part, and it benefits us. And at the end of the day, when things finally fall down, we are, even though we'll continue to benefit, the country is going to be irreparably damaged. And that's something that, like, quite honestly, I cannot accept. And it's honestly something that I've always been calling for, a temporary kind of refugee strategy for Canada, where you take in certain refugees for an amount of time. You Once things change in the country to a certain determined metric, then you kind of like say, listen, you've got some skills, you've got some money, It's time to go back and help rebuild. And that's the kind of thing that we would need to kind of implement for Venezuela, because the work that's going to be is needed to be done is monumental. I mean, like I said, it's almost like Bolivarian in its, oh god, I'm shuddering whenever I say that. But I mean, it's Bolivarian in its like size and scale. Because just as Bolivar had to create a whole new country, um, Venezuela has to be completely rebuilt.
It's just absolutely crazy. And also, just again, the information about the hackers going after, like, the political figures is quite interesting, because it kind of tells me that a lot of the people who want to have a change in their own countries are finding ways to make that change, and to also, find more about like these sort of people. It's really crazy though.
It is, but like I said, it's one of the tools that is needed in this fight. You can't rely on just the old ways, like pots and pan protests. That's not going to work anymore. These people don't care, because they know that they you can s- they can you can beat outside their house with a like a steel pot all day, and they're not going to do anything about that. No one's really going to change. The police aren't going to aren't going to kind of go over to the opposition, because like I said, the leadership is garbage. They don't care. They don't really want things to change. They just want to be the ones in the leader's chair. They want to be the ones sitting in Miraflores. Um, but like, you have these hackers who maybe they're part of some opposition group, maybe they're part of the United States. We don't really know. We really, really don't. But they are a valuable tool, and they're doing something that needs to be done in some way or another. Um, and there needs to be people keeping that up. There needs to be more kind of cyber attacks against the leadership. I'm not talking about the essential services. Don't mess with those. I mean, if anyone is listening to this and is getting inspiration, for the love of God, don't hit that. I mean, these people have suffered enough. Hit the leadership. Hit them where it hurts. Hit their bank accounts. Screw up their travel plans. Post embarrassing emails and pictures of them. It's part of the way to delegitimize this government, but do not affect the health services, water and sewer, electricity. That's not the way. That just empowers the regime. At the end of the day, it's like when the dam got shut down, and Maduro essentially blamed the Americans and the opposition for hacking an analog dam, which isn't possible because it's not connected to the internet. Um, Things like that do not really do us any benefit. Um, that being said, once again, I have to keep saying that we should take all the leaders of the MUD and throw them out, or just stop giving them money because they're useless. Um, it's so frustrating to watch, and it's so frustrating to see. Like, I know that I think it was China Uncensored. They had Leopoldo Lopez on China Uncensored, and it actually made me angry, because he's part of the problem. He is such a big problem for Venezuela. He's one of the reasons that that the country sucks. Like, he really is. And to give him a space and to treat him as if he's some is laughable, because he's just nothing. Es una traidora. Simple as that. In my personal opinion. Um, I hope someone else doesn't come back on here and start like roaring at me. That instead, he's actually a very good boy. He's a good boy. He goes to church on Sundays. He hugs grandmothers or something like that. And it's completely wrong. I've got it completely wrong. No, he's garbage. He's I I just can't stand him. And when Wido, oh my God, Juan Wido angers me. He's so fake. And did you see that video of him talking and like the sign
It was
or
like
whatever it
like
was?
this thing was just going down.
Huh?
That was like really hilarious.
No, sorry, I didn't hear you for a second. Or like when. Hmm?
Yeah. I was kind of saying that like when that sign just came down, that was hilarious.
And you know what? It really suits the government. It suits his kind of interim presidency because I mean, just like that, he's falling apart. Um, the problem is that he's not going away. You know, he's like a really bad rash. You know, or some kind of like persistent medical disease or something. You know, you think you treat it, you put the lotion on, you take the antibiotics, but gosh darn it, back up he pops, and not in a good way either. You know, he just comes back to just irritate and annoy us. Um, and like I said before, I'm sorry to kind of like chat so much. It's it. it-
No. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. But getting back to the topic of Venezuelan,
Mhm.
well, I'm not sure I could contribute much to it because basically you're just kind of expressing the views that I noticed because just the whole entire situation I feel is like incredibly sad. And I really hate it when I see and just read like, the people on Twitter trying to, devalue the experiences of the Venezuelan people. For example, I remember like during the start of this whole entire pandemic with the coronavirus and everything, there were people making these sort of dumb comparisons of like, these sort of empty store shelves where they said, well, you see, United States is like Venezuela because we don't have, the same sort of supplies right now. I'm like, dude, unlike, in Venezuela, you, you can actually count on companies to make your stock back, for the bread and whatever kind of dishes that you want. Venezuela is like a bully empty for
Yep.
years.
It is like I mean, you only got to look at like Caleb there and the I guess the water hole, literally, or whatever that is. Like it's like almost like Groundhog Day or something like that. You see the water like appearing, and you're like, oh golly gosh, the pipes are working. You know, I can actually bathe today. Like we cannot even begin to come close to that, like come close to imagining that kind of lifestyle. You know how that is every day. Like the closest I've had to that is when I went to India and I literally had to wait like a half hour for them to turn on the water. You know that's as close as I've gotten, and that was, let me tell you, that wasn't good. So you know we've got people there who, you know, they're literally starving. They literally have to eat garbage. I mean, um, I think Maduro actually banned me on Twitter once because, well, the Spanish version of it, the English one is still for some reason still has me on his account. But I literally said like the greatest contribution Maduro has made to Venezuelan society was new recipes for pigeon. Um, and it's sad, but it's true. I mean, I'm just waiting for like Abuela's like cookbook, and it's just like it's like pigeon and flamingos and all kinds of crazy crap. But um, let's see here.
Hey,
Hold
Caesar.
on.
Hello.
Oh,
Hey.
Yeah, I mean about Venezuela. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really horrible. I mean, I've seen videos of like people who have to wait in line just so they can buy like essentials such as cornmeal and flour and vegetables. Like you can't even find like chicken. You would have to probably spend. I mean, I've seen videos of people waiting in line for hours just to get some eating chicken. And also, also in Venezuela, they have this program called the Clap, which is like a box, and it's basically just simple essentials what the government thinks what you're gonna eat in a month. But it looks like that's something that probably would only last a day. I don't know if you heard of that program, the Clap.
I have, and I've seen the box. Like I have friends in Venezuela, and one of them took a picture of it and showed me all the ingredient and all the things that was in it, and it was horrible, man. Like you couldn't make anything out of that. Like for like a family of three, let alone like for yourself for like a month. Like it's insane. Like how things have gone, and like we got it good over here, man. Like I got to admit, we got it really good in comparison. Um, but like I said, there's people there, and they're literally like eating like zoo animals. Like they've killed flamingos and everything, like, and ate them.
Yeah, and also I think there was a video of like somebody like having to buy like 20 million like Venezuelan dollars for a Big Mac. Like, no, I don't think so.
Well, yeah, like the bolivares are useless. They're worthless. You can go on Etsy right now and buy a purse made of bolivars.
A matter of fact, I read an article which basically states that the coins for like World of Warcraft has more value than that.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. It's bad, man. Like, and that's why the rebuilding is going to be monumental.
I mean,
to say the least.
when Venezuela like collapses just literally completely, what do you think is just gonna happen?
I've actually thought about this, and kind of looked at history and that too. I think it's going to be kind of like a weird Soviet like collapse situation where there's like a little bit of anarchy, a little bit of kind of like violence in the streets. There's going to be deaths. I don't deny that. People are going to die, and there's going to be infighting, but like the level and the magnitude depends on how ready something is to come in and replace that regime. Now, there was a guy on earlier, Nate, and he was talking about like how there should be like a right wing dictatorship come in and for a couple of years and then transition into a democracy. And he threw out 5 years as kind of like the maximum time. I can't go with 5. I have to go with a minimum of 10 to 15 years, because the rebuilding and the restoration is I keep saying this because I have to, is that it's monumental. The country is a complete wreck. I mean, I'm pretty sure Zimbabwe looks at them and says, we don't even want to be like that. Like, it's bad, man. It's bad.
Okay, we have another speaker right now. His name is French Consciousness. How are you doing, French?
Oh, hello, Tyler. It's been some time.
Yeah, I think the last time we saw each other was this other space from the other woman. I forgot her name now.
Rachel, I think it was Rachel's space, I think. Yeah, I'll add my 2 cents to the situation.
Sure.
I read an article earlier this week stating that Venezuela is expected to become the poorest nation in all of the Americas, surpassing Haiti. That alone gives an idea of how bad things are over there. Even with the pandemic, Venezuelans, thousands and thousands of Venezuelan refugees cross the borders to Brazil and Colombia on a daily basis. It didn't stop. Even with the pandemic, it didn't stop. And it's going to get worse, unfortunately. At least it's going to get a tad worse before it gets better. And as long as Maduro is in power, things are not going to get better for Venezuelans. And he's only going to leave, and he's only going to leave his seat of power. The only place he's going, and the only place that he's going to after leaving his seat of power is the casket. He intends to stay until the day he intends to stay in power until the day he dies.
Yes. He's also probably going to go to Cuba. If he doesn't get killed, he'll flee to Cuba because I mean, the Cubans run Venezuela essentially. You know, it's
Yeah, right.
it's a parasitic relationship. You know, the Cubans provide security, the Venezuelans provide the resources. You know, especially oil, which Cuba really needs.
You know, for a country that actually has more oil than Saudi Arabia, I mean, they should be like just like the Dubai of like South America. I swear.
It's I hate to say this, it's literally Latin American political incompetence and greed. That's what ruined it. And like with say for example Dubai or Saudi Arabia, you have like a clan family structure that is in place, and that kind of helps keep the wealth kind of centralized. But I mean, when you have a place like Venezuela where it's essentially like a free for all, everyone's in it for themselves, and there is no kind of like loyalty to the state or to national improvement or anything like that. So I mean, it's essentially let's shove as much money as we can into this suitcase and get out of here before somebody either arrests us or bursts into our hotel room and shoots us a la Narcos. Um, you know, it's just like that. Like it's chaotic. And fringe like I've seen the effects of Maduro's policies, man. Like I spent a lot of time in Lima, and it's like every step there's a Peruvian, every two steps there's a Venezuelan. You know, they're everywhere. And I've seen like there was one guy I think I still have him on my contacts. He was a communications professor in I'm pretty sure it was in Maracaibo, and he was working as a construction worker. Not a very good one, but he was working. He was trying, um, and that's really crazy for me to see. You know, people who have like these skills and education, and they're reduced to such like shameful levels of poverty that they have to do things that they've never had to do in their entire lives.
Let's also not forget that before Chavez, a few years before Chavez, Venezuela was a relatively prosperous country.
Yes, it very much was. And I mean, like the Chavistas like to tout like the free education, as they call it, like some kind of their Bolivarian revolutionary reforms and all this nonsense. But like the free education was in Venezuela for like 40 years before. And there was good with it, but the problem is that you then had like a corrupt left-leaning government take power. The biggest mistake that the Venezuelan establishment did was allow Chavez to be even eligible to run for elections after he was released from prison. I mean, the man was a traitor. He literally revolted against the government that he swore an oath as a military officer. And you let a traitor run, like it makes no sense. Do you really think that this man, like he's going to come out and swear an oath to obey the Constitution, the same Constitution that he tried to overthrow 10 years ago? Really, it was ridiculous. It was a stupid miscalculation, and it failed miserably.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's an even more and there's an even more ominous shadow that that might affect Venezuelans in the near future. That shadow is called Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
Oh God, I know he might be back.
Yes, he currently leads all election polls in Brazil. There's a good chance he will be elected. And if that happens, he will offer political and lots of political and financial support to Maduro's regime in Venezuela. Mr. Lula da Silva, Mr. da Silva in this case, or Lula as people in Brazil call him, he was buddies with Chavez. He is buddies with Maduro. He is also buddies with the Cuban government. He was Lula. I'll call him Lula. Lula was recently interviewed in a huge podcast in Brazil. We're talking about a podcast that has millions of subscribers on YouTube, and the guy literally said that Fidel Castro was a nice guy. He said that live. He said that live. He said that because one of the presenters of the podcast is the guy. I don't think the guy had any experience in dealing with politicians, and he literally asked, "What is Fidel Castro a nice guy? He's a nice dude." And Lula was like, "Yeah, he's a nice dude, man. He's a bro. He's like a bro to me."
Yeah, you could just everyone. He's just like a man's man, you know. He's just like everyone's friend. You can sit down with Fidel, and he'll understand you.
Yeah, Lula. You can also do that with Lula. Like both Lula and Fidel. Fidel was a very charismatic leader. He was a very evil person, but he was charismatic, and so is Lula.
Yeah, like he definitely is. By the way, Fringe, like if you don't mind me asking, are you Brazilian?
Yes, I mean it's not. Yes, I'm Brazilian.
Well, if Lula wins, you have my sympathies. I will let you know though that Uruguay is always open to you.
I really have to consider the possibilities. I mean, I love my homeland, but man, sometimes things can get really rough, and we need to make hard choices.
It is. It's kind of sad that like 100 years ago, Brazil was literally a dreadnought, like naval power, and it's gone from that to Lula da Silva.
I remember, looking at Brazil a long time ago. It was like 2 years ago. There was this page I remember seeing where the college students would come out with normal, but then they came out as crazy looking. I forgot the name of the page.
Oh God, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it.
I'm not recalling the name of the page, to be honest.
But I actually know like a couple of Brazilians who live here in my province in Canada, and one of them was just like, I was like, "Did you ever want to go back?" And he goes, "Man," he's like, "Why would I want to go back?" He's like, "I left Brazil to get rid of all this communist crap," and he's like, "Now I'm up here, and it's still and these same idiots are trying to change it." And he's like, "Man," he's like, "I'm running out of places to go."
I remember this one video a long time ago.
Unfortunately.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you a little bit.
No. You finish your sentence, and then I'll speak after you. It's better that way.
Yeah.
All right. So there was this one video I saw from Brazil a long time ago, and I think it was like a bunch of feminists going after a guy because he pulled his dick out.
I know this video. Like there was this feminist walking with the breasts exposed, doing some topless in the street, and it's like, yeah, I want to expose my sexual organs too. And then he put his dick out for a few moments. Then there's this mob running after him, and he has to climb an elevation that's right outside of the road to escape the mob. It was quite bizarre, but I had my share of laughs watching the video, to be honest. From what I understand, the guy wanted to, in his view, to expose the hypocrisy of the feminists who want the right to walk naked, but they don't want men to do the same. That's what I understood back then. And from what I saw, he didn't molest, he didn't touch any of the girls.
But by the way, like I like kind of like getting back on the kind of topic of Venezuela. As much as I like talking about Brazil, I mean, I got to admit, I'm a big fan of bossa nova. Like Joel Gilberto's one of my favorites, but um, the thing is, I'm actually got to admit, Fringe, I'm actually disappointed that Bolsonaro was all talk, because I remember like, yep,
Bolsonaro is a crook. Let me straight this right away.
they're
He's
all
both a
crooks.
disappointment and a crook. But
He-
then there's Lula, who's also a crook.
like for me, like my experience in Latin, South American politicians, I should say, kind of to be inclusive, uh, um, is um, is that they're all literally garbage. It's just there's no such thing as a good Latin politician. It's just one who steals less than the others.
Is there
Pretty much
some?
to be honest. Then that's not too far. That's not too far from reality, to be honest.
Cesar,
Yeah, I never understood why like Latin America has always had like horrible leaders. It's like, is there any like Latin American country that's actually like functions properly? I mean, there was a
I cannot
point.
really think of any in my head right now, honestly.
Chile was kind of okay, but then just kind of went straight to hell. I mean, maybe Costa Rica, but I mean, that's it's kind of it's mostly due to tourism, I guess. I don't really know. It's a really low bar.
Then there's also El Salvador, which is one big question mark right now since they've adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender.
I don't know. El Salvador is still a giant meme. I mean, well, it's a meme with like AK-47s and narco gangs.
Yeah,
It's a hellhole. I know people who are from El Salvador and they'll never go back.
Yeah. A matter of fact, my state has like the most, immigrants from El Salvador. So it's not uncommon for me to find people from El Salvador here.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
just
I want things to work out but I know that just adopting Bitcoin as your as a national currency doesn't mean your country will automatically prosper. There's a lot of other things a country needs to do in order to become prosperous.
Yes, like remember, like, well, Venezuela tried to get on the whole Bitcoin scheme too. I mean, they had the petro, and that was just a joke. But kind of like what I was saying earlier was, I'm really disappointed that like when Bolsonaro came in and he was like, you know what, we're gonna put some pressure on the Venezuelan regime, and he was kind of hinting at, there might be some kind of military intervention or something like that. And as soon as he said that, I lost a lot of respect, because I mean, like, the internal security situation in Brazil is, uh to say the least, terrible.
Just a question for French. Like, is it also true that there was some sort of controversy with Bolsonaro with the rainforest?
Yeah.
Yes, there is a controversy in Brazil about the way handling the many forests in Brazil. Brazil has lots and lots of rainforests. The rest of the world knows the most is the Amazon, but there are other rainforests in Brazil as well. And yes, Bolsonaro has been accused many times of not doing a proper job, not handling them properly. And to be fair, he hasn't been handling them properly. He's doing a terrible job handling them. But you see, when you compare that to Brazil, to a number of Brazil's previous presidents, and that includes Mr. Lula. Like, his predecessors aren't much better than him, to be honest. They've all been mishandled because the Brazilian government has a tradition of being extremely bureaucratic and ineffective at anything. At the same time, they simply they can't handle. They establish a bunch of arbitrary rules, but they can't. But they do a terrible job of enforcing these rules. Besides, the Amazon rainforests, it's a very complicated place to enforce any kind of rule, since there are lots of, since there's a lot a good chunk of it simply doesn't have infrastructure, basic infrastructure like roads, for example. Doesn't have like, imagine like, think about it. In the Amazon rain in Brazil, there's this city called Manaus. It's a city with 2 million people, which is, let's say, a higher population than a place like Philadelphia in the United States. Which I think I have 1.6 million people. Someone correct me if I'm wrong about that. And there's basically no roads leading in connecting the city to other parts of Brazil. If you want to drive from Manaus to São Paulo, you can't do that because there aren't roads. And this
Dear
is a city
God.
that's not. And this is a city that's not exactly small. Now imagine that besides Manaus, there are lots and lots of tiny villages. Some of them, many of them, inhabited by natives, and there are no roads leading in or out of these places. And in many cases, the people living in these places, they don't have access to stuff like, I don't know, sanitation or plumbing. Sometimes even electricity is hard to get by. When it comes to electricity, things have improved a bit, but they don't have access to a lot of stuff that people in Canada and United States have easy access to. And when it comes to enforcing the law in these places, it becomes very complicated, sometimes almost impossible. No, I don't know if I'm making myself clear about that.
You are. I just find it funny though that I remember when Biden declared Bolsonaro, what was it, like a climate desperado or something like that, or a climate outlaw or some weird like old man word that he was using. You know, I actually just laughed my ass off at that because while he's like giving Bolsonaro all this like trouble, Evo Morales was like literally running around lighting things on fire down in Bolivia. Typical, Bolivian government behavior, of course. They like causing trouble.
Wait, is that the same guy who had like that sort of, speech about like, chicken making you gay?
Yeah, Evo Morales. I think it was him. I think it was him. Like, I know Evo Morales has a long history of being homophobic.
Well, yeah. He also has a history of very colorful ponchos, which is strange. But the funny thing is that every year he does this thing, and I'm kind of sad that he's not president because it was even funner when he was. He used to make this speech where he essentially spent an hour whining about how Bolivia can't go to the beach anymore. And it was always the highlight of my year. I always look forward to this cringy speech. And then they would have like the Bolivian Independence Day, where you would see the Bolivian Navy merch when they don't even have a navy. It's hilarious. Like, Tyler, you got to look up Bolivian military parades. They're hilarious because you see like the Bolivian Marines.
Yeah, but even Bolivia is another country that it could have been a lot richer than what it is.
Peru could have been a lot rich. I mean, literally almost every country in Latin America could have been richer, except Paraguay, because that's just there's nothing there.
I heard at one point, please correct me if I'm wrong though, but like I heard at some point when they were actually part of, the Spanish Empire, they were actually richer under them than they were just, off independent.
Yes. For the most part, that was true. By the way, since we're being around YouTube and that, this is not an endorsement of colonialism by any stretch of the means. But yeah, they did kind of do a bit better. Now this might be just, kind of colonialist nostalgia speaking or something, in terms of some people, because I mean, it kind of ties into the conversation of what's really better, like how should we measure success? Should it be purely economic? Should it be individual rights and freedoms? Should it be success under dependence? Like what metric can we really use to determine what is quote unquote better. You know.
Also, there's something
Mhm.
I'd like to add, because from my perspective, like I think the United States and their allies, they're so focused on what happens in the United States, is so focused on what happens in the Middle East, thousands and thousands of miles away from its territory, that they don't really pay a lot of attention. They don't really pay a lot of attention to what happens on the Americas, and this can bite them. This can bite the United States in the ass hard, because if countries like China or Russia, if they start getting countries like Venezuela, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, or Ecuador to start signing formal military agreements with them and establishing military alliances, if that happens, it could be a disastrous geopolitical defeat for the United States.
Yes, it could, but you see, the thing about this is that the United States would then probably instantly renew the Monroe Doctrine. But we also cannot discount the fact that the Chinese are already making moves in South America. Like
And
I
also,
keep
and also in Africa too. They also doing some move in Africa.
colonialism. Sorry, Caesar, you were saying something?
Yeah, apparently China's just probably going to end up taking over the world eventually. I mean, what China's doing, it's not colonialism, but what they're doing is that they're taking the resources, they're taking the resources from Africa, and they're using the same resources to build their infrastructure and all at these African cities and whatnot. What's different from the Europeans is that the Europeans, they would just take. The Chinese, they're taking, but they're also taking the resources and actually making use to them and giving them back to them.
Not overly, to tell you the truth. Like the thing about, say, for example, like European colonialism. Like I'll use the place that I know best, which is Peru. I mean, they did take, yes. There is no doubt in my mind that they did, and the evidence is all there, plain as day. But the thing is that they also built the infrastructure there. They built resource. They put things in place for the kind of the ruling class. You know, the Peninsulares, the Criollos, the other kind of groups in the casta system. And they stayed and they built. I mean, like the thing is about China is that they're not interested in mingling with the population. You know, they want to separate themselves as an alternative kind of group. You know, they want to be they are the Peninsulares, and the Peninsulares don't mix. You know, they're not going to like go like intermarry with local people. That
Yeah,
does not happen.
It's quite
Or
clear.
if it
Like,
does, it's very rare.
Yeah,
Um,
it's quite
you
clear
know,
that
it's
like
so I don't like that kind of idea that China is like having it's colonialism with friendly intentions, or developing character, or developing developmental intentions. Um, it's quite the opposite. I mean, like the Chinese are very malicious. The regime, I should say, not the people, but the regime is very malicious and manipulative.
Yeah, I agree, because it seems as though like slowly but surely they're just taking over everything, at least the regime. Because like most movies nowadays that are produced in Hollywood, they're also co-productions of China. The
Mhm.
Most of the basketball teams nowadays, they're also underneath like China rule, because they cannot have people say, "I'm in favor of Hong Kong," and then you have the cases of like discrimination against like the African people, because there was this one story I remember reading where black people could not even enter into like a McDonald's, and
KFC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's true. Like, one thing that we should add about how China is operating in Africa is the question of the debt trap. The Chinese government lends money to very poor countries that they know that won't be able to repay these loans and say, well, you can't repay these loans, so I'll take a piece of your infrastructure or your territory to me for 1990 years. They've done that in Djibouti. They've done that in a number of places in Africa. I think they've done that in the Solomon, in the Pacific, in the Southeast Pacific too. They do that a lot in Africa. And another point I'd like to add is that when it comes to Chinese investment in Africa, sometimes they refused to hire to hire locally. They would bring the workforce from China to work on these projects.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like even like it's even closer to home for you, man. Like Ecuador. Ecuador has built they had a dam being built, and it's a bit of a flop, but it's also a couple $1 billion. And China is the one who got a lot of the building contracts for it, and they're the ones who extended the loan. So the Ecuadorian,
it's mentioned that it's kind of interesting that you mentioned about that, because have you guys actually seen those kind of videos where, like, any sort of thing that the Chinese build, it gets destroyed easily?
yes.
I think I've seen some stuff about that.
I've seen one of those. I've seen a video of like there's a building in China that was built in 20 days and it's still standing. I mean, when China's doing stuff like that, I just cannot believe what they're going to do to what they're going to do with Africa. I mean, if they can build something in 20 days, just imagine all the infrastructure they're going to build in Africa. I'm like, seriously.
Yeah, but like the problem is though is that the like all this infrastructure is just a pipeline of sorts. It's an infrastructure pipeline. So they take the resources, they send they send them back to China. It's the same thing when they get like these contracts to build railroads and roads and mines and things like that. The Chinese companies get the contracts, and it's mostly staffed by Chinese workers. So it's literally make work projects in other countries, but not for the locals. Now the locals indirectly benefit to an extent. And that's a very big extent, or not a very big extent. Like I mean, like the Chinese, this is primarily to benefit them. But like we've really gone off topic. And this is more about building Venezuela than it is building in Africa or in the strange neighbor to the east of Venezuela, Suriname. A place that I'm still surprised even exists. It's kind of like a Paraguay for me. It's kind of like a mystical place that is real, but is also not. Um, you know, but
just a small correction: to the east of Venezuela is the old English Guyana.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, there is that, but I mean, just to a little bit more to the east of Guyana is Suriname.
Yeah.
Like it's essentially like it's Dutch Guyana. That's really all it is. It's just Dutch. Everything else is really unchanged. Besides the fact it's also had a weird military dictatorship for a while. It's kind of interesting. And then there's the French one where everyone goes to like give birth in so they can get French citizenship. I know a few Peruvians that did that, but kind of really back to the conversation as we kind of wind it down now. By the way, it's been a really good conversation. I'm glad people are participating, and thank you guys and everyone else who's come on and the people in the chat. I'm sorry I can't respond to all of you. I'm not a very good multitasker. But and Tyler, man, like thanks for being co-hosting with me.
Anytime, man.
It's always a pleasure to find a fellow Latin lover. Okay, that sounds wrong when I say it, but hey, it is in various sense of the word. It is that'd be a good podcast. That'd be a good podcast. The Latin lovers, talking about South American issues. um, but no, like the rebuilding is going to be so important, and I mean it is going to take kind of a lot of convincing to do, and I mean the main thing is that we can't let any of the current opposition leadership have any piece of this pie. They must be left out, and that's very um arbitrary. um it's it's might come off as unfair, but at the same time they deserve it. Like Latin American politicians are not the same as everyone else. They're generally corrupt, thieving bastards, and that's a nice way of putting it. You know, um, the, if you find me one good South American politician, I'll show you 150 that are not.
Yeah, it's almost like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty much.
yes, pretty much. Like, if you think U.S. politicians are bad or evil, then you guys have to see Latin American politicians. Just like Ernest said, it's terrible.
It is discouraging. Like,
like
like no one wants to participate in this. Like that's why like politics in Latin America are weirdly insular. Like everyone, like it's generally the same people. It's generally the same parties. Except in Peru that one time with Free Pap, this weird cult. But that was just a one-off meme decision. Um, yes, but for those who don't know, the last not this current Congress, but the previous one, um, a religious cult was the I think second largest party in Congress. And they all dressed up like Charlie Heston extras.
what?
It was yeah. Look up FreePap, FREEPAP. You're gonna laugh a lot.
Free pap?
FreePap. The symbol is a fish. It's they're a Christian cult. And they all wear beards and they all have like robes and stuff.
What?
Yeah. There's a religious cult that was a very major part of the Peruvian Congress. It's awesome. It's such a train wreck. And they were all like it was just strange.
Just
But yeah.
just one topic that I'd like to talk about a little bit here about Venezuela is their border dispute with the English Guyana, which they basically say, "Hey Guyana, half of your territory belongs to me."
Oh God, and that's because of the Americans. You know, I think God, what was the name of the president? He had like 100 kids. Literally. There was one Venezuelan president who was very active in the interest of his people, mostly the females. And I think he was the one who made that deal. I can't remember because there's a lot of Venezuelan presidents.
What's your opinion on AMLO?
Oh God, I don't even get me started on Lopez Obrador. I think he's an idiot. I think he's just an absolute incompetent idiot.
There was this one news story that was going all over Mexico about him just attacking video games. Have you guys seen that one?
I really haven't. I like in my other podcasts. I generally
No, I haven't seen.
Oh yeah, about that.
I know, like I know I don't like him. He sounds like an uncle in a sitcom or something. Like he has like this very weird. His voice is just weird. I can't focus on it when he speaks. Like
He speaks like super slow. Like it takes like a long ass time for him to finish.
I really miss, weirdly enough, I miss Vincent Fox. I don't know why, but I do.
I
Like,
remember, like, during his inauguration, he actually invited Nicolas Maduro to the inauguration.
yes, he did. Yes, he did.
And like everybody was like, screaming "dictator, dictator." That was great.
The funny thing is that when Evo Morales was kicked out, the guy who let him come hang out was AMLO. AMLO gave Evo Morales political refugee. Juan Vicente Gomez, that's who that guy was, because he had like several. I think he had like 100 children. Very busy man. Very busy man. Terrible president too. I think he was the one who was responsible for the Guyana Essequibo situation. But I actually don't think that that's really a relevant issue anymore. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the matter is solved. It was decided a long time ago, and even if it was, say, kind of forced upon the Venezuelans, tough.
Just a question. Just a question. AMLO in this case refers to Lopez Obrador, the president of Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Yeah.
Another Maduro supporter,
Well,
unfortunately.
they believe in 21st century socialism, which is just dreadful. But I mean, then again, most of these politicians do nowadays. Like a lot of the Latin American ones. I mean, you have Pedro Castillo in Peru. Guillermo Lasso is definitely not, but Lasso in Ecuador is just screwing everything up. Apparently, Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion is in Ecuador, and it's getting bad. I have it on good authority that Guayaquil is essentially like the Wild West. It's just like prison gangs are rioting in the cells. There's like drug cartels operating in the countryside, and apparently the president. Now, this is what I was told. I don't know if it's 100% true, because everything I've heard about Ecuadorian presidents is generally wacky. The stuff I heard about Correa was awesome. Like there was apparently a secret cabal. This was like a conspiracy theory. It was so funny. I just got to share it. There was apparently a cabal of LGBT people that were running the government behind the scenes. It was a shadow government. It was called the Rose Circle. And this was literally believed by a lot of people. Which
That's like that's kind of, I don't know, surreal. It would be.
I have friends who sincerely believe it. I have friends who still to this day.
Okay, seriously, I thought like, I used to think Trump was messed up, but then I hear more about these Latin American prisons, and they make Trump look like a genius.
Yes, they all do. Like literally, like I. It might be unpopular for me to say this, but I miss Trump. I really miss him. I don't miss the Twitter, but I do miss him like being president, because he seems to have kept shit in line. Like he kept the Chinese kind of like from being overly ambitious. But yeah, like Latin American politicians are generally terrible. The last competent one Peru had was Fujimori, and that's a very objective kind of conversation.
Okay, so getting back to Trump a little bit, like
Yeah.
when he was president, of course, immigration doesn't seem like a big problem like it was right now, because right now we're seeing like a lot of influx of people coming from Haiti, a lot of people from these other Latin American countries that have been, illegally crossing our borders. But it seems as though that they know that Joe Biden would actually put up with this sort of crap, whereas they just think that Donald Trump would not put up with the crap.
I agree with you. Um, but what really scares me is like what's going to happen. Um, if he has like if his senior moment goes on a little bit too long and Kamala has to take over. Um, I really don't like.
I think I heard that she actually did take over for like a day though, only a day.
Yeah, because Biden was getting colonoscopy, which is that's a great way to break that glass ceiling.
When it comes to comparing American politics to Latin American politics, like the vast majority of both Democrats and Republicans, they're angels compared to politicians in
Yes.
Latin America. Like there's a few politicians in America that I would say that be careful, watch these people, and take care when dealing with them. One of them would be Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Like, be careful when giving that woman positions of power. She is one of them, but she's one of few. The vast majority of Democrats are sane people compared to what is in Latin America.
There is this
Yeah.
one, there's this one thing I remember from Ocasio Cortez, where there was like what happened with the interaction with like what happened in all that places right at the Capitol, and then she started to play victim and say, "Oh my God, I could have been attacked," blah 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 blah. But we literally saw like on Google Images like where her office was, and she was actually somewhere else during
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. It was she got caught in her own life and started to make so much bullshit about it.
Yeah, she's a joke. Remember Beto O'Rourke?
Isn't that the guy who campaigned but trying to do skating to look hip and cool? Is he?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was cringe. That was cringy. But even Beto O'Rourke, like even if he isn't really that great, he's still better than the majority of the politicians in Latin America.
Yeah.
The thing about Bento though, like the thing that really scares me, at least from my point of view, is that he wants to go after like the guns.
Oh
But
yeah, he's like, yeah, hell yeah, we're taking our guns. What bothered me too was not only just that, it was like the way he tried to come off as like, yo soy Latino, and he just failed miserably at it. Like, I called him Beta O'Rourke because of that. Like, he was just so, because like he's trying to be like one of the guys, and it was just terrible. He's like, yo soy Beto O'Rourke, yo soy listo para ti, or some weird like cheesy.
It kind of came across as pandering to me, honestly.
The only one who could get away with this kind of thing and not be pandering was Jeb Bush. I got to be honest. Like Jeb legitimately spoke Spanish.
And he married I think he married a Mexican woman too.
He did. His son is running for, I think, state attorney. I don't really know anyone in Texas, so I'm not really sure, but I think he is. But yeah, like I actually don't mind Jeb. I could tolerate him. I know someone who worked on his campaign, and apparently he's a very nice person, very wholesome. But yeah, that still would make me vote for him, though. I would have voted for Trump if I was an American. Especially when during his campaign he sold a taco bowl, which I thought was terrible. I'm serious, Tyler. He did it. He did it.
Ernest, you're Canadian, right?
Yes.
So, like, I know very little about Canadian politics, to be honest. I know there's a number of parties, and that Justin Trudeau just won re-election, I think.
Kind of.
And that the Conservative Party is like
It's a joke.
They're a joke.
They're a huge joke. Like they're really milquetoast conservatives. They're not really people who are they're not really conservative. Like, it's essentially, you can sum up Canadian politics as whatever this other party is doing, I will do it better, or I will make it, I will cut it. It's either I will fund it more or I will fund it less. That's literally the thing. Like, they all piggyback after each other.
I see. But what's your take on Justin Trudeau as a politician? Is he doing a good job, in your opinion?
No, he's not. He's doing a terrible job. He's always done a very terrible job. I voted for him in 2015. Like, I admit this. I'm not. I regret it. It was a mistake. But the problem with Trudeau is that he likes spending our money and not always on us. Like, he I think under him, Canadian expenditures for foreign aid exploded, because right now we now owe over $1 trillion. That's our national debt.
You mean the Canadian national debt like is higher than the Canadian GDP at this point?
Yes.
And
Yeah, it's pretty bad actually, because the COVID pandemic spending kind of sent us into overdrive. It got really bad.
Also, I want to add something else for like the Trudeau stuff. I remember, like when I first heard about him, one of the first things that I read was that for his cabinet, he decided to get like women for like a diversity quota.
Yeah, he did a lot of diversity things, and they kind of blew up. He actually angered India by doing some of this, because some of the people he brought onto his cabinet were Sikh nationalists, or at least suspected of being Sikh nationalists. And the Indian government was not really happy with that.
And then there was this other video I remember where he was at some sort of mosque that apparently promotes separation of like the boys and girls.
Yes, he did that too. Did you see all the blackface videos?
I saw his blackface pictures. I was like, "Whoa, dude!"
There's a video of him running around. I think it is the Canadian Parliament, like when he was like a lot younger, with a afro wig and blackface paint on, and he like sticks out his tongue at people, and it's quite zany and very inappropriate.
He also did like some sort of like apologetics for like what happened, and I think in France it was some sort of terrorist attack. I can't remember which one. There was like a lot of them in that country, but like at some point he mentioned, of course, that he did not want to be racist against Islam. Blah 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 blah.
I don't remember that. To tell you the truth, I remember like there's so many things he's done wrong. Like, there's just so many things. It's so painful.
And then it's like this one speech, he was like, "I am a feminist."
Yeah, and then you think it's 2015, and everyone started clapping. It was like the word of the year, or the phrase of the year. It was cringy.
Wait, is Justin Trudeau? I don't know. Isn't he the guy that said, "If we kill the terrorists, they win"? I don't know if it was him.
Yes, that was him. He's not the smartest guy.
Didn't Justin Trudeau also said that you had to use people kind instead of mankind?
I remember.
Oh
that.
God.
Yeah. Yeah,
I was like, yeah, I mean, all those years I spent studying English, I think I have to throw it in the garbage, because Justin Trudeau said that using mankind is wrong. It's people kind now, because mankind is apparently sexist.
Yeah, you're not missing. Yeah, like, as a Canadian, I'm very embarrassed.
Yeah, like after he did that whole entire speech about people kind, what happened was he later backtracks, claiming that it was a joke, but we all know it's not a joke. We all know that.
No, it wasn't. I mean, and then he went to India, and then he dressed up like a lot, and he danced. We really haven't gotten over it. But guys, I think I'm gonna cut this short here. I think we've kind of had a very good conversation about Venezuela, and then like kind of gone to having a kind of a zany conversation about everything else. But it was fun. I might do one of these again in the future, maybe next week or something. So thank you all so much for participating. Really, really good conversation, bit of laughs, bit of levity. Tyler, thank you so much too, man. Muchas gracias, en serio.
You're welcome.